Welcome to the Holy Smokes Podcast, a show about faith, friendship, fine tobacco, and drink. I'm Steve Ryder. I'm in the Cigar patio of Bourbon Brothers in Colorado Springs the day before the Holy Smokes Conclave starts, and so we're at the pre-Conclave events. We just left the study at Megan and Etienne Hardre's place, and I am with Tom Kakadelis. Tom, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Steve.
So when I got to Megan and Etienne's, Buzz Leonard from the Pacific Northwest, Seattle area, he was like, "Have you met Tom yet?" I'm like, "No." He's like, "You gotta talk to Tom. You gotta talk to Tom." And we had a chance to just kind of get to know each other a little bit. And I was like, yes, I definitely need to talk to Tom. And so I was like, hey, what if we just bolt Megan and Etienne's just a little bit early and head over to Bourbon Brothers and set up here before everyone starts showing up, so you'll start to hear people as they start to filter in from the Hardre's, from the study. And dude, thanks for being on, my man.
Yeah, thanks, sir. I appreciate it, man. It's like, you know, this has been a goal for me to get out here to the Conclave for a few years, and I have I had an opportunity to schedule it, and so it just fit perfectly. So
wonderful.
It's really great to be here.
All right, first question I always start every show with, or at least try to, what you smoking?
I'm smoking a Romeo Julieta from Havana, Cuba.
Nice.
Yes, sir. It's a little Corona.
Yeah.
It's got, you know, it starts off with a little pepper, but it really smooths out. Romeos are typically pretty medium bodied with a lot of flavor, and they typically jump around a little bit, and you get the middle of it, and then you get a little burst of energy, and it shoots up the dial a little bit, and then it typically finishes off pretty powerful. So I generally set it down and kind of think about what's next.
I am pulling out one of my seconds. I got a box of, I don't know, I have a whole bunch of seconds that I got on a big order, and I'm just pulling it out right now to open it up. This one's a Maduro, and I just had one of my Connecticut seconds at the Hardre's, and so yeah, I'm burning through some of these.
Now, when you get
great dollar for dollar sticks.
Yeah, that's what I like. I like value. I also like to. I like to save to treat.
Yes,
my humidors,
same.
you know,
Same.
my humidors, like I've got this section where it's, yeah, I'm going to go there if I'm going to do something kind of celebratory. The other side of that is I've got the day-to-day cigars that I feel comfortable with sharing and love to do that.
Yeah.
And over the years, the humidor's gotten significantly larger, and so.
How big is your humidor right now?
About 4,500 sticks, somewhere around there.
Wow,
Yeah.
That's impressive.
So it's, but it's accumulation of 16 years of cataloging and
We'll talk.
places around the world.
We'll talk about that during rapid fire questions. But you said that you were born in Connecticut.
Yes.
You're a Northeast guy.
Yeah, I am. I'm a Yankee.
Greek,
yeah.
Kakadelis, obviously.
Yeah, if any member of your immediate family, birth-wise or immediately before that, is Greek, then you get to call yourself Greek. And then if you have a Greek last name, then that
then you're really
cinches
Greek.
it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, my dad was first-generation American. His dad immigrated
Really?
here in 1912. Little offshoot of that is I was at Drew Estate in Nicaragua some years ago, right around about 2012, 2011. And I was talking with Jonathan about it, and I said, well, why don't you blend a cigar while you're here? And I said, well, okay, let's do that. And so we did, and I knew it was going to be 2012 would be the 100th anniversary of my grandfather's
Coming to the U.S.
So I designed a cigar as a shorter, sort of a petite Corona size, like my grandfather smoked, and I titled it Immigrante, which basically means immigrant.
Yeah.
So Immigrante, we made probably 40 sticks, and back in 2011, gave my brother a few, and then and I've been enjoying them annually.
Yeah.
So that's
Do you still
that
have
was
them?
fun.
You still have some?
I still have 4.
4.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not going anywhere.
Why it's annual now when
It
you
has
have
to
them.
be. Yeah. But that was my upbringing.
What kind of a family?
Yeah, my dad and mom were married 50 years, and he passed in 2004. And my dad really, my mom and dad smoked cigarettes. My dad never really, he wasn't really much of a cigarette smoker either, but he did smoke some when he was in the service. He was a Marine, Second World War, and then after that he pretty much quit. And then a few years after that, my mom did. But on my 16th birthday, my dad took me to New York. A bunch of my friends, we went and saw Jesus Christ Superstar. And then he took me to Cattleman West, got me a big steak, and afterwards he got me a cigar and he said, "Okay, you're a man. Now act like it." And I said, "Okay, what does that mean?" He goes, "Well, take responsibility of your life, prepare yourself to be a husband and a father, and commit yourself to preserving the American dream."
Wow.
And I said, "Well, is that a man?" He says, "Yeah, but then you got to defend it." And so for the last, I guess now 50 years, that message continues to ring in my heart. That really, I think God used my dad to plant that seed to say, you're going to have a part in that in the future. And I have fortunately been able to contribute to some of that. But that was my upbringing. My brother is 5 years.
You said the war. I assume World War II.
Second World War.
He was a veteran?
Yeah, Marine. Served in 4 battles in the Pacific, Roya Namur, Saipan, Tinian, and Iwo Jima.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Never got injured in the service. Got bursitis in his knees. Then he came back, and then he went back into the Korean conflict and got out. He served 11 years in the Marine Corps. And it was funny. He told me early on, he said, I said, "Dad, I think I'm going to take my commission in the Marine Corps." He said, "No, you're not." I said, "Well, Dad, I mean, you were a Marine. Why not?" And he just went back and forth for a little bit. And he said, "Well, it's real simple, Tom." He said, "Only one person per family should ever have to survive Parris Island." And that's where he was trained for the Marine. He said, "So you're not going in there." He said, "You need to go in the Air Force. They got beds to sleep on." So I took his advice, but I went in the Army and stayed a few weeks, and then the Vietnam War ended and they kicked us out. I got an honorable discharge, and I'm just grateful that I had the chance. But it was really more of a kind of a time in my life where I was wanting to follow in his footsteps, and I really didn't. It wasn't about being a Marine as much as I just wanted to be like my dad.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you had a great relationship with him growing up?
Yeah. It was funny because I never knew a day in my life when I talked to my dad or was with him that he didn't tell me he loved me.
Wow.
And didn't tell me he was proud of me.
Which is really unusual for that generation.
Yeah.
Really unusual.
He never got it, so he reacted the other way.
Was it the Greek heritage that really
No, it was more, I think he realized how important it was to not keep your feelings hidden about that.
Huh.
He always knew his dad loved him, but he never got treated with the same verbal affirmation that he felt like was important.
Yeah.
And I think that was what really made him tell both my brother Carl and I how important it was to say he loved us.
Yeah.
And he felt free to physically show affection, hugs, kisses. He was always on our team. He may not have always agreed with what we were doing, but he always was on our team. And that's pretty amazing. And I have an opportunity now to talk to men all the time about not only their relationship with their dad, but just their relationship with their spouse, their kids, and their parents. And I talk to them about how important it is to express your feelings while you can, because you don't ever want to take a day for granted. Mm-hmm. It's very important to just say what you think about who you love and care about as much as you can, because you don't want to ever take that for granted. Totally. And Dad never did. I mean, he valued that. In fact, part of our journey took us to Southern California to plant a church back in the 80s. And we took our 2 young kids with us, obviously. And my dad said, well, why do you have to take the kids? Why don't you can't leave the grandkids here? And you can go, and we'll take care of them. And so that's how much connection he really
family.
felt with our family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said siblings?
Yeah, I have one brother, Carl. He's a few years younger than I, and he is a Christian counselor with Grace Life Ministries up in Warrenton, Virginia. Yeah.
What kind of kid were you growing up?
Sports all the time. I mean, every time we could get our hands on a ball, we played something.
Yeah.
Basketball, wiffle ball, baseball. My dad got me in Little League. He actually got me on a team playing Little League, and the coach didn't want to. I'm sure I can think of the scene even right now. And he walked up to the coach and he told him, he said, I want to get my son on the team. And he said, well, what position does your son play? And he said, well, he can pretty much play all over the infield and outfield too if he needs to. He doesn't pitch. He said, well, we need a catcher. He said, so do you think he'd be interested in doing that? And he said, well, can he get on the team if he is? And he said, yeah. Okay, well, then he'll be a catcher.
Challenging you.
So he got me on it, and I caught from Little League, 10 years old, until I got to college.
Yeah.
And then I fast pitch caught when we did prison ministry in Chino Prison in California. We'd take a fast pitch softball team into the prison, and we had a ringer for a pitcher.
Yeah.
And so I caught him, and in between the two games, we had a morning game and afternoon. We had lunch with them, and all the prisoners would gather around, and we'd have somebody there to share their personal testimony of their faith in Christ and how that changed them. And we saw many. This was a medium security prison, so it wasn't like the most dangerous, but we went in on a monthly basis, and for a couple of years, I would go in with the team, and we got to hear the testimonies of a lot of these guys that got saved early on when we came in, and now we're sharing the gospel and starting Bible studies in the prison after we'd been there a few years. So, so catching got me an opportunity, and I saw how God used your physical abilities, your interests, your experiences, all those things to leverage an opportunity to share the gospel.
It's important.
And that's, in one sense, how I got into smoking cigars, is because I knew I could leverage the opportunity just to sit with guys and just have a conversation, and how that leveraged into a future conversation or even a present conversation about the gospel. And so I've often referred to cigars as social lubricants. They're the way that God uses to grease the conversation in order to make a way for the gospel.
Yeah.
And that was critical for my communication is in my relationship with guys, is I wanted to always leverage what I had to share what God had done since I became a Christian.
You mentioned college.
Yeah, well, my conversion story really kind of came around in my high school years.
Were your parents?
My parents were not believers.
Okay.
My neighbors were, and they prayed for my folks, prayed for my mom and dad. And then my mom and my brother 1970 attended the showing of the movie For Pete's Sake, which was a Billy Graham movie back in the 60s and 70s.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother and my mom attended that. I was away at school, and they came home, and our neighbors sat down with my brother and my mom and led my mom and my brother to Christ. And then I heard about it, and so that summer I came home, because I went away to a military high school. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But I came home that summer, and I got picked up for shoplifting in a store. And then I was driving a car, my parents' car, and I had been drinking, and I damaged the car. I didn't completely wreck it, but I damaged it. And I realized that in that 3-week period, that the direction of my life was not going the way I had intended for it to go. And so I realized something was missing. I wasn't sure what it was. I told my dad I thought I needed a psychiatrist, and he said, no, you don't need that. And I said, well, something's got to change, because the things I want to do, I'm not doing. And
Somewhere in the Bible, I think.
yeah, and I realized that something had to change. And so my mom said, well, why don't you go down to this little Jesus coffee house down on Liberty Street? And I grew up in Danbury, Connecticut.
Yeah.
And on Liberty Street, they had this little Jesus coffee house back in the 60s. That was a big deal, early 70s. And so I went down there one night, and I got talking to the folks that were kind of leading that ministry. And my mom said I should come here, and so I showed up, and it was my babysitter growing up. She and her future husband were leading the ministry down there.
Yeah.
And so I went back. I went to it, and there was this real attractive girl that was there. And so I thought, well, you know what?
That's hooked more guys in
I think
into
I
a
need to go
relationship
back.
with God.
Yeah, so I went back, and I went back again. And I think the third or fourth time I went back, and Bob sat down with me, and he shared his personal story of how God had rescued him from a lifestyle that was not pleasing to God. And so he shared his personal story of how he came to Christ. And it was June the 6th, 1972, that Bob shared the gospel with me, and I received Christ as my Savior. When that happened, I knew something was different. I really did. I didn't know quite what it was.
How so?
Well, something on the inside was changed. I felt clean. I felt different. I felt like something had actually really happened. I mean, I had prayed before and sort of in a secular sort of way, like God help me and those kinds of prayers. But I'd never prayed a life-changing prayer. I'd never prayed, God change me. It'd always been about changing everybody else. It'd always been about changing the situation or changing the things I thought I didn't have control over. But it was the first time I'd ever prayed that God would change me. And he did. So for the next 2 years, I wrestled with what that meant. And I can remember leaving high school and going to college. I went to Georgia Tech. And I can remember going there and sitting in a couple of classes and listening to people talk about religion, and I thought, I need to understand what I believe about all that. And well, I ended up changing schools, and I came out to Colorado, right out here. I went to Colorado State University. So in '74, I started attending a Bible study on Tuesday nights. The truck driver used to come in to Moby Gym up there, and he would, on Tuesday nights, he would teach a Bible study, and there were about 400 kids in that Bible study. And I went in there one night, listened to him, and I thought, you know what? He knows what I feel. I was feeling those things, but I didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
And he got me reading the Bible. So I went from a basic upbringing in church to conversion experience, and then to actually reading the Bible and realizing, well, there's more to this than information. This is life change stuff right here.
Yeah.
And this guy actually believed it. And I thought, well, if he believes it, I need to at least I need to think about this. So that's what happened. And it was there that I started seeing my faith become real.
Yeah.
In a lifestyle, life change sort of way. And then when I graduated from CSU, I started a business. I started a construction company right out here in Colorado, and we did hardscape for commercial and residential, and hired a bunch of guys. I had a business partner, and we started our own business. And so it was there, and he was a Christian, so I began to realize that, if he knows what's going on and this guy knows what's going on, I need to get in on this game. And it was through that I began to think, I might like to do this for a living. I feel like God's maybe calling me to this. And it was really an interesting time of that, leaving some of my dreams behind and following Christ. And I realized, this is real. This is real. And as a result of that, I left the construction business And in 1977, I surrendered to the ministry, and I realized I needed to prepare. Well, the girl I was dating in Georgia at the time, when I was back in Atlanta, I'd moved back to Georgia, took a job with a construction company there. And I was dating this gal, and she thought I was going to be a project manager for a construction company. Well, then I came to her one night, and I said, what would you think if I went in the ministry full time? She goes, you're kidding me. I said, yeah, I'm thinking about going into ministry. And she goes, not as a youth pastor, right? I said, well, I don't know. What's a youth pastor? Well, she had graduated from a Christian college, and she had pretty much sworn she was never going to marry a preacher.
Yeah.
Well, she fell in love with me, and then she had no choice. That was 45 years ago. So that was my journey in the ministry calling. But going back to my time in Danbury, when I was growing up, I realized that it was during that time that my whole family was going through a spiritual renewal. So my brother and my mom had become Christians. They were growing in their faith. I had become a Christian, but then what about my dad? You know, he'd been raised in the Greek Orthodox Church. He'd sung in the Episcopal choir when he was a kid. And
Yeah.
he went to church. I mean, we always went to church. But, you know, it's kind of like, you know, I understood the lyrics, but I didn't understand the music. And I think, and it was, my mom and I were visiting together when I was a student at Georgia Tech, and she was down visiting me during spring break.
Hey, how you doing?
And my dad was home, and this little church planting pastor up in Connecticut just knocked on my dad's door at the house while we were all gone. And he went in and talked to my dad and led my dad to Christ. So then in 1974, when he became a Christian, then our whole family were believers. And my dad took off. And
How so?
He really believed what he said. And he was always a man of his commitments, but, you know, it was like, Dad, you're different.
Yeah.
And he had become so changed that his perspective on things was moved from a survival profit sort of motive to my life has more meaning and purpose than that. And we saw that change in my dad, and it totally impacted my brother and I.
Really?
And
Really?
And as a result of that, for all the years we were in ministry, he was constant supporter, our biggest cheerleader, prayer partner.
Wow.
And so my
That's
dad, who was a loving dad, when Jesus came in to his experience and transformed him, it totally changed what we understood to be real faith. And so my dad, not knowingly, actually became our mentor of faith because of how radical it had and impacted his life.
Wow.
So it was pretty cool.
Let's talk about those ministry years.
So
You said you ended up in Southern California.
yeah, I
in the
ended up in
80s,
Southern
but
California.
Where'd you start?
Well, I started in Atlanta. When I left, when I got into ministry, and actually when I got to Atlanta, I started attending First Baptist Church in Atlanta. And a very obscure, little-known pastor named Charles Stanley was the pastor, and I started attending there. And I found myself going to church on Sunday morning with a notebook and a Bible and taking notes, I mean, copious notes about what he was saying every week. And I was mulling over this and thinking about it. And I would then recopy all of his notes. And my parents bought me a loose-leaf Bible, and I started doing it in the loose leaf, and I would insert the messages into the Bible that they had given me, this loose leaf Bible. And I found myself just studying, and I took a course in Greek on Moody Bible Institute by mail. They didn't have internet. They didn't have all that stuff. They'd send you a lesson, you did the lesson, send it back. And I started taking that, and I realized God had called me to something, and I wasn't quite sure what it was going to be. And so when I surrendered the call, that was July of 77, I walked forward and I told Dr. Stanley that I felt like I was calling me to the ministry. He said, well, go over there and sit down on the front row. So when the service was over, now there's 2,000 people in this place. And he said, after the service was over, and he was kind of closing remarks, he said, I want you to come back up here, young man, come back up here. So he called me back up, and he sticks a microphone in my face, and he says, now, you believe God's called you to the ministry? I said, yes, sir, I do. I think he has. He says, you realize that could take you to any place in the world. Are you ready to go wherever God could lead you? I said, well, what are you going to say? I mean, you're in the middle of all these people. What are you going to say? No, I'm not going.
Yeah.
No, I said, yeah, absolutely, sir. I'm ready to go wherever God leads. He says, you got a girlfriend? I mean, right there in front of everybody. I said, well, yeah, I do. And he goes, you willing to leave your girlfriend to follow the Lord? I said, yeah, I'm willing to do it. Well, at the time, the girl I was dating, who's now my wife, 44 years, didn't know I was talking about her.
In front of a 2,000-member
Right.
church.
And so afterwards, that night, she asked me in the parking lot. That was where we met after the service.
Yeah.
She asked me in the parking lot. I said, were you talking about me? And I said, well, yeah. She said, well, what does that mean to you? I said, well, what are you asking me?
Are you dumping me?
And she said, she said to me something like, well, if you're going to go in the ministry full time and you're dating me, do you expect me to go with you? I said, well, yeah. So you were talking about me? And I said, yes. I said, well, I'd like to see where that leads. And don't you know, 6 weeks later, I proposed. 9 months after that, we got married, and that was 44 years ago last month.
Congratulations.
So, so those early ministry years then took us from marriage in 78. We went to Western Seminary in Portland, Oregon for 2 years. I studied in pastoral ministry there. Came back for an internship that was supposed to last during the summer, and then it ended up lasting 7 years. I stayed on staff at First Atlanta for 7 years. And
wow.
And everybody there.
What was that like being around
Charles?
Yeah.
Dr. Stanley and all that. It was the most.
I spent 15 years working for Dr. Dobson.
Well, you understand.
And in the broadcast department, we got access to him that not many people did. And as the chief audio engineer, I got to see him in a way that very few people there at Focus or Family Talk got to see him.
Fortunately, because of the kind of guy he was always pretty much, on a personal level, he was pretty much to himself.
Yeah.
He loved photography, he loved to travel, and
really?
That was really important to him. And he loved his family, and he raised his family the way he felt like he should. And we all looked at him with a great sense of admiration because he was candid about his life. I mean, he was really honest. I mean, there were struggles. I mean, he told us what the ministry meant, that you were going to be point person in this effort in the kingdom. And he said, the goose at the front gets all the wind, so you better be ready. And so he was
That's a great analogy.
very, very much reminded us that, we were in this together. And I spent that summer doing street ministry in Atlanta, and learned a lot about homosexuality and lifestyles of that. People that were, down and out in addictions and drugs, and because that was Midtown Atlanta at the time. So I got a chance to really learn so much about ministry during that. So I had become the associate pastor of evangelism and world mission for the church, and I was on a regular basis commissioning and sending men and women to places all over the world to serve the Lord. We'd have an annual missions conference and a regular focus, and we were constantly I was seeing people going everywhere in the world and starting churches and ministering. And then I realized one day I came home and I was praying, and God said, well, you've been sending all these people. I think I'm going to send you. Are you ready for that? And I said, well, I told you before, I am changed. I'll go wherever you want me to go.
Yeah.
So I told my wife, and we'd been praying anyway about what the future was, because we'd been there 7 years and had a good ministry there, but God was stirring us for something.
Yeah.
And so I called a friend of mine in California that was the director of missions in Orange County, and I said, I've got to go back to finish my degree, and I'd like to do that at Golden Gate Seminary. But in the meantime, I'd like to start a church. And he said, well, that's great. Come on out. Let's go. We'll help you. He said, we'll commit $300 a month to you if you'll come out here and get started. And I said, well, Doyle, I'll come. But so I went out, met with Doyle, and he said, somebody I want you to meet. And I said, well, who's that? And he said, I want you to meet Rick Warren. He said, Rick started a church down the road here, and he said, you ought to talk to him because he's about a year or so ahead of you. Boy, that's a great cigar. So Rick and I spent the day together talking about it, and he said, listen, I'd like you to come on staff, but you're going to have to raise your own support. And I said, I think I want to start a church. He said, okay, I'll help you. He said, and I'll meet with you once a month. We'll pray together. I'll tell you what I'm learning.
Wow.
Whatever you want to do, you can do whatever. I'll help you any way I can.
Wow.
So then I went and I talked to Doyle again. I said, Rick will help me. So he said, well, Rick will help you. He said, when Rick helps you, he means it.
Yeah.
And so he said, but I want you to meet one other person. This is Mike Carlisle. Mike's now the director of missions, the associational missionary strategist for the San Diego Baptist Association down in San Diego. I'm going to see Mike next week. And Mike was pastoring Capistrano Valley Church at the time. And so I went down and talked to Mike, and I told him where I was, what I've been doing, going to seminary and everything. And he said, well, come on down here. We'll sponsor you. So that church sponsored me $1,500 a month.
Wow.
So I had $2,000 a month sponsorship to get the church started in San Clemente.
Wow.
We started the church in 88. Well, we actually started the prayer group in 87. And then in 88, we launched, November of 88.
How old were your kids at the time?
My kids were 6 and 4.
Okay.
And so I finished my degree at Golden Gate and then launched the church. I finished in December the previous year, and then we started the church. And our prayer group was 8 people. And we said, well, let's start. Let's get going.
Yeah.
They were all on fire. So we did. We started Mar Vista Community Church, and we grew to about 225 in the first 6 years. And then I felt like I was a little bit separated from my family back east. And so my mother-in-law had had a heart attack, and then my dad had had some health issues.
Yeah.
And so we started praying, Lord, if you want to get us closer to Atlanta again, then we would be open to moving back east. So at that point, I brought on a co-pastor.
Your parents still in Connecticut at the time?
They had moved to Georgia to be near us, actually, when we were on staff.
Got it.
And then we moved to California.
Yeah.
That wasn't the best of times. Took their grandchildren with us. And sure enough, the Lord opened a door for us to move back east to Charlotte. And the co-pastor that had come on staff had taken over the church, and the church was doing fine. But there was another church in the community that was struggling. They didn't have, they had a pastor, but they didn't have real elder leadership. They didn't have strong church leadership.
Yeah.
So my co-pastor and the pastor of the church decided to get together. They merged and started Heritage Christian Fellowship, which goes on to this day. And they're at 1,800 or 2,000, something like that.
Yeah.
In San Clemente, so they're doing great. And it was obvious, the affirmation that it was the right time for us to move.
Yeah.
And so we moved back to Charlotte, and I served on staff at a evangelical Presbyterian church. Now, you understand, I've been a Baptist all my converted life, right?
Yeah.
But when I went to this church, I told the pastor, I said, you know, I'm Baptist. I'm not a Presbyterian. He goes, I don't know. He said, I really am too. He said, I think you should baptize believers too. So sure enough, over the next 5 years, he transitioned that church to become independent.
Yeah.
And I served that staff at that church for 20 years, almost 20 years.
Yeah.
Then, and during that time, God used it to be it really was a transition of sorts for me, because I realized that being a Christian wasn't something you did by denomination. You did it by calling.
Yeah.
You served where God called you. And so I really felt like that was a turning point for me, because I'd been a senior pastor in a church start, but I'd never been a senior pastor of a church.
Yeah.
So I left the ministry I was in, and it was in 2012, and then the Lord really showed me that one of my interns who had started a church needed me to come and get involved in his body.
Yeah.
So my intern from the previous church hired me on staff with him as pastoral care pastor. And I served with him for 3 years. Then the Lord called me to a senior pastor role out in the country a little bit. And then up to the present day, where I'm now contracting with Christian ministries to advance ministering to pastor to pastor.
Yeah.
And I really feel like that's a sweet spot for me right now.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Now, since you've retired from the ministry, quote unquote, say retired.
Yeah, because I'm not retired. Not at all. I'm busier now than I ever was.
You actually bought some cigar lounges. You bought one cigar lounge, and then you had a whole bunch, and you got out in 2016.
Yeah, we bought one in 2006 down in South Carolina.
Yeah.
And then got that up and going and worked that for about a year. That was in Greenville, South Carolina.
About when?
2006.
2006.
In 2007, we started one. We opened one in Charlotte, South Side.
Were you?
I was still in the ministry.
Okay. What got your full-time ministry, and then you do this cigar thing on the side? Where did that come from?
Well,
and how did the opportunity come?
Yeah, it's good. So I began to see that men were really not connecting. Men's groups were hard to get. Men were not coming to church. Men were not accepting leadership roles. There was this hole in the culture where men were stepping up to responsibilities that I think are basic. And there was really no place for them to be safe. They almost had to be in a AA group or a CA group or some sort of addiction or whatever to get in a group. And then you try to get them to go to a marriage retreat, and all the wives would go, and the guys would find a reason why they didn't want to go. So I realized that there was one thing that I could see guys getting together around all the time, and that was a cigar.
Yeah.
And I saw the impact of conversation around cigars that was notable. I mean, clearly a vehicle for social interaction.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, if I could create a social experience, then with cigars, then I'm going to try to do it.
You're bringing men in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was the genesis of it.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I started the process of forming these cigar lounges, and then I had to fund them because you have to have resources to pay for the real estate.
Yeah.
So we started retail stores. So we started men's gift and cigar stores.
Yeah.
And we started doing that, and it was a way for us to connect with men and do the things that we're doing.
And you opened up you opened a few and you bought a few more. And how many did you have in total?
We ended up with 5, helping out with one in Georgia, north side of Atlanta, and then we tried to contribute to that, some of the same vision.
Yeah.
And then in 2014, 2016, we started to look for other things that we were interested in. So we started that, the transferring of all that to other entities.
Yeah.
And in 2016, I basically got out.
Why'd you get out?
Well, I really wasn't good at retail business.
Why? Why do you think?
Because I couldn't give it 120% of my life. I really felt like I was in ministry full time, and then this was more like a
kind
hobby.
Of a side thing.
Yeah, and you can't do business as a hobby. It needs to be your business. And I realized that it was not fair for my wife to do it. It wasn't fair for anybody else to depend on. I had good people working with me, but it wasn't what I really wanted to do. So slowly we exited out of that experience and end up getting back full time in ministry. Plus, my kids had gotten married.
Yeah.
They were starting to have grandkids. And frankly, I'd rather spend time with my grandkids than do anything else. So there was a lot of contributing factors that ultimately, I think, made me think differently. Now, in 2019, I started thinking about getting back involved again, but it wasn't until a year ago or so, a year and a half ago, that we started another business in the cigar brokerage import side. And so now I'm doing some of that in the Virginia, Maryland, D.C. area. I have a couple partners up there. My brother and I are in business up there. So that's why we call our company Brothers Solutions and Imports.
Nice.
Now we're going to branch into coffee, so that's going to be a new thing. So we're going to start importing coffee from a couple other countries that you normally don't get coffee from.
Yeah. Very cool. Now you're doing contract work for a bunch of ministries that you rattled off.
Yeah.
Family Research Council.
Yeah. North Carolina Family Policy, Ed Choice. So part of that is because I really still feel the need for men to connect. And my passion and burden is for pastors who didn't have what I had. I had support all the way through my ministry, which allowed me to really feel like not only had God called me there, but he wasn't going to, the scripture says, he that calleth you will also do it.
Yeah.
I really believed God would do it.
Yeah.
And he did. He provided me with support, and I don't mean financial as much as I had that, but also just the support of God really connecting men, connecting pastors. So sure enough, through the years, contacts had become, and so over the years I really found myself networking with pastors of all denominations from different walks of life, race, creed, background, nation of origin. So all of that, because I just don't have those innate biases. I mean, I was raised in a family where my dad was Greek, my mother's German. My dad was Greek Orthodox, my mother's German Lutheran. They got married Episcopalian. They went to a Church of Christ, and then they were born again, went to a Baptist church, Presbyterian church, Independent church. And so I've served in 3 different denominations. I've been ordained in 3 different denominations. I mean, I feel like I don't have that innate bias that you might normally have if you've only seen it from one perspective.
Denominational territorialism.
Yeah, I don't have that.
Yeah.
I mean, my doctrine aligns probably better with Baptist, but the kingdom is not about being Baptist.
Yeah. I've said this on the podcast numerous times, but those years working for Dobson, every denomination under the sun were there. And some of the most awesome conversations I would have were with the guys in the broadcasting and women in the broadcasting division. We just sit down and talk, okay, so what exactly do you believe? Okay, on this one fine point over here, I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I know you.
Right.
And I love you.
Right.
And we sweat and bleed and cry together here in these trenches. And so, it really expanded the scope of my vision in terms of everything that the body of Christ really encompasses.
Yeah, that's exactly it. It just opened you up to new perspectives. I think I was blessed to have the likes of Charles Stanley, David Chadwick, Rick Warren,
Yeah.
Mike Carlisle, and many others who were not so denominationally tied that their heartbeat was for the kingdom. And they were kingdom-minded people.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been.
Huge. That's huge.
That's what's transformed my thinking about ministry.
Yeah. Tom Kakadelis. Let's get to rapid fire questions.
Sounds good.
Rapid fire. Fire. Here.
How's that stick treating you?
This stick is a little bit of work, but I think it's because the moisture it's been in my box, in my travel box for a little bit, and it's a little dry, but it's delightful.
When did you first try cigars or pipe?
So I got my first experience with a cigar when I was 16, and then I didn't have another cigar until I was, 1998.
Wow.
I was on my 20th wedding anniversary, and I got so sick I thought I'd never have a cigar again because I swallowed the smoke.
Oh, gosh. Oh, man.
So my wife saw me in a fetal position trying to make it through the night, and she said, I think he's cured. No, it didn't cure me, and now I had to fix it. So that was that, and then I think I really actually enjoyed my first cigar, my back porch, probably about the year 2000. Yeah.
You ever tried pipe?
Yeah, too much work.
That's what most people say.
I've got pipes and I like them.
Yeah.
My grandfather on my mother's side, German one, he smoked a pipe. My uncle smoked a pipe, but too much work. Cigars are so easy.
What's your favorite cigar?
Probably the one I'm smoking, but
It's a great answer.
so it changes all the time. But if somebody says, what cigar do you want to smoke tonight? If I could get you one, what would you want to smoke? It'd probably vary a bit depending on a couple things, but the Liga Privada No. 9 would probably be one.
That's a popular one.
Padron 64 Anniversario.
Yeah.
The Partagas Serie D Cuban. Cubano Limitado by Casada. And then the My Father Le Bijou 1922.
What's your best dollar for dollar cigar?
Diesel.
Where's your go-to place to get your smokes?
My own humidor.
Favorite liquid pairing with your smoke?
Diet Dr. Pepper.
Ooh, another soda guy. Nice. Most interesting person you've ever met through cigars?
Michael Jordan.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, that was awesome. So our shop in South Park in Charlotte was right in the circle with a steakhouse and an Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
Nice wine bar. And so one night I realized that when Mike was having a cigar over at the Double Eagle Steakhouse right across the way. So I thought, well, I'm going to go introduce myself. So I went in my stash, and I knew he smokes two cigars basically, a Hoyo de Monterey Churchill, and then he smokes the Padron 64 Anniversario. So I had Padron 64s in my box, and so I went and grabbed a couple. I grabbed a couple of my father's and a couple of things, and I went over to the steakhouse. And of course, he's pretty well guarded.
Yeah.
So it's not like you just walk up to Michael and sit down and hand him some cigars. So I walked over, and there was obviously Tony was there, his bodyguard, and so I said, Tony, I didn't know Tony at the time, but I got to know him later.
Yeah.
But I said, sir, I've got a couple. I own the cigar shop over here, so I'd like to give Michael some cigars.
Yeah.
I said, sure, go ahead. He's fine. And so I went over to Mike and I said, I just wanted you to know you're certainly welcome to come over and have a cigar anytime you want. we're right over here, and
Yeah.
if there's anything I can get for you, I'd like to just introduce myself, and here's a couple sticks.
Yeah.
He said, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Nothing much happened, but
Yeah.
a couple months later, Dave, his pilot, comes in and says, Michael's just come into town, and he's going to come over and he wants to smoke a cigar. And I said, well, great. So Tony and Michael show up, and his publicist comes, and they all come into the lounge, and everybody's like, their jaws drop and their eyes get wide open.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said, hey, Tom, it's good to see you again. And I said, well, welcome, Michael. I'm glad you're here. I said, come on in. And so that started a friendship that evolved over the couple years that he would do that. And then one day he comes to the shop and he says, hey, Tom, what do you got in your stash? I said, well, what do you want, Mike? I said, what do you want? And he said, wait a minute. He says, I got cigars. So he reaches over and gets his, members only jacket, I think he had, or something like that. He pulls out a 2-stick travel humidor.
Yeah.
He's got in his pocket. He opens up and he says, here, have one. It's a Hoyo de Monterey Churchill. He hands it to me.
Yeah.
He says, let's just have a cigar. Yeah, I got him today. I said, well, I'll tell you what. I know what he drinks. And so I have a bottle of it in my locker in the inside. And I said, I'll get you a little something to drink. We'll sit here and talk. He goes, sure, that sounds great. So we sit out on the patio, and everybody's walking by. They're not believing who's there, So it was it's probably 9 o'clock at night. And so we close at 11. 11 o'clock, we're still sitting there. Everybody's gone, closing the shop. And we sat for 2.5 hours talking about life, sports, stuff that he was comfortable talking about, and cigars, of course, and he asked me about the business and what I liked about it and everything. And never forget it.
Wow.
It was great.
Wow.
It was great.
That's amazing. Best place you've ever smoked?
I would say probably Monte Cristo No. 2 on the beach in Havana, Cuba.
Ooh.
I did it 3 nights in a row.
Wow.
Yeah.
Star Wars or Star Trek? Or neither?
Nah, not really.
All right. Favorite food?
Welcome to Colorado. Thank you.
Well, again, it kind of depends, but I guess somebody would probably say I like Lou Malnati's pepperoni pizza from Chicago. So I buy them, and I buy them in packs of 6, and I have them shipped from Chicago to North Carolina. I like pizza, but I like Italian food. So I would have to say that if I'm picking, I'm probably going to have some sort of an Italian dish.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay. Dogs, cats, neither, or both?
Dogs, Springer Spaniels.
Nickname growing up?
TK.
Kike.
TK. My initials.
TK.
Or CAC. Most of the time, TK. Yeah.
What's one unusual fact that few people know about you?
Somebody asked me that not too long ago. I went to the same military high school that Donald Trump went to.
Are you a reader?
Yes.
Favorite 1 to 3 books not titled the Holy Bible?
Pilgrim's Progress, the story of George Whitefield, biography, and I don't know, the one I'm reading right now is called The Cure by John Lynch. It's great.
Are you an early riser, a night owl, or average?
I'd say more average. I'll get up early when the Lord wakes me up early. I'll get up early and start writing. I like to write early in the morning, so that's important. But I'll stay up a little bit later because my wife and I like to watch a couple of shows and sometimes we'll stay up later to do it.
If you could live anywhere, where would that be?
I don't know. It's tough beating where I live right now, Pinehurst, North Carolina. I live on the 4th hole of a golf course, so it's kind of hard to beat that.
Who's been the greatest influence in your life? Your dad? Yeah.
My dad.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. I mean, from a human standpoint, he still lives on. I mean, here I am, 67 years old, and I still spend more time quoting my dad than I do anything but the Bible.
What do you do for self-care, to rest, to recharge?
I do 2 things. I usually go on about a 4-day retreat to read and rest once a year, try to find a spot to get away. We're beach people, not really mountain people, so I try to find a place where we can get away. This year we went to Aruba. I spent 9 days there. I'm a big fan of spending enough time that you can actually be away from what you're actually doing.
Yeah.
So the pandemic hindered our trip to Barbados back in December of 20.
Yeah.
So I ended up going to Aruba last year, or in March. Yep.
Into sports?
Yeah, I love sports.
Who are your teams?
Well, I went to Georgia Tech and Colorado State University, so there's really nothing to cheer for there. No, CSU had a good team, couple good teams this year.
Yeah.
Georgia Tech had a really good baseball team. They typically do.
Yeah.
But I like college football. It isn't as tainted yet as I think it will become.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But I like college football a lot, so I'm big in that. I grew up being a New York Giant. When I was real young, I was a New York Giant fan. But their coach, one of the players was Tom Landry, and when he retired, he became the starting coach for the Dallas Cowboys. And so in 1960, I switched teams and became a Dallas Cowboy fan, and I've been a Dallas Cowboy fan ever since. I go from year to year deciding whether they're Cowboys or Cowgirls, but they're still my team. Baseball, I grew up, all my idols were Yankees, but I was a Red Sox fan. So I love the Red Sox. I follow baseball probably more than anything. I like professional golf. I'm a big fan of old golfers. I love following what they accomplished. Love Tiger Woods. Amazed at what he was able to accomplish in a really short career, actually. It's not over yet, but it's not what it will be, what it ever was. So I'm a big fan of professional golf. I love it. I love golf. Yeah. So that's it. I like fast pitch softball, so I watch the girls' softball teams. I'm becoming a fan of the Premier League because it's on at a time I can actually watch it. So I don't know. Somebody confronted me the other day, said, "What are you?" I said, "I'm a Manchester fan." "Which one?" They asked me. I said, "Well, Manchester United." But when Chelsea came to Charlotte a couple weeks ago, the Charlotte team beat them. So, I could get excited about football that way. But my real heroes were Bobby Richardson. He was second baseman for the Yankees in the 60s. Bobby grew up in Sumter, South Carolina, lives there now. He's 88 or so, 89. He led Mickey Mantle to Christ. Bobby wrote his story about his conversion, and it was the first book I ever read. I was 10 years old.
Wow.
I read it off the shelf. I picked it out myself, read it, the Bobby Richardson story, and it was my first introduction to what it meant to be a Christian. And I got to tell him 4 years ago, I told him that it was his book that really did it. One Thanksgiving, I called him in the 80s, late 80s. I called him, and he answered the phone. And I said, "I want to thank you." It was Thanksgiving. And I said, "I've challenged my church our church family to call somebody this Thanksgiving and thank them for the impact they've made on their lives." And so I called Bobby, and I thanked him.
Wow. That's awesome. Tom, how do you want to be remembered?
Well, as a flawed human, failed a lot of things. I've like I told you earlier. I mean, I've stolen something. I've wrecked something. I've abused things at times. I've been tempted in every way you can be tempted. I've been greedy about stuff, and I think I've certainly not been a perfect example even in my own family. But I would like them to remember that I never wanted it that way. I wanted it differently. And now that I'm a saint, and yet I still don't always act like one, but I'm still a saint. And that the grace of God is bigger than everything I've ever done and ever will do.
Yeah.
And that my failures and my weakness is an opportunity for the Lord to demonstrate His strength in my life, and not my strength, but His strength. For His strength is made perfect in my weakness. So I'm happy to rejoice in my weaknesses because I know Christ will get the glory.
Final 3 questions. What does Holy Smokes mean to you, and how has it contributed to your spiritual journey?
Well, Kay Harriman and Owen Hill and Paul Felitis, all in different situations, introduced me to Holy Smokes. And back, I don't know how many years ago now. And as a result of that, I got involved with, I got acquainted.
Yeah.
And it now means that it's a place for guys to get connected around, the camaraderie and the fellowship that we have in the Lord, and that we can draw other men into it so that they too can discover God's amazing grace.
Yeah. That's beautiful. All right, if you could have a holy smoke with any 3 people throughout history, living or deceased, who would they be? Can't name Jesus.
No, Jesus, no, I'm not. I'm okay there. I think Daniel would be one.
Ooh.
Because I think he got as close to being fired up as anybody, along with his buddies, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But Daniel has always been an example to me of somebody who stood on conviction, and I'd like to know him. I'd like to get to know him. Joseph, because as a man that was wrongfully accused on many occasions, and yet still held strong to his faith.
Yeah.
And then I think I'd like to sit down.
With your dad one more time?
Yeah, I want to sit down with my grandfather.
Oh, your grandfather. Which the immigrant?
My dad's dad.
Yeah.
I only saw him in his later years in life, and he was not in good shape.
Yeah.
And I would like to know him.
Wow. Wow. You're getting emotional.
Yeah.
What is it about your dad's dad? That tugs on your heart like this.
I think because if you love somebody in your life so much, you want to know who influenced them.
Ooh. Yeah.
Who made a difference in their lives? Right and wrong, up and down.
Yeah.
Who were the most important players? And in my dad's life, I'd have to say I think my granddad probably was that, and I really didn't get to know him. Wished I could.
Last question. If we're to meet 1 year from today, and I got a can of your Diet Dr. Pepper,
Yeah,
and I have my Coke, what are we celebrating?
My wife and I will be married 45 years, and at that point, she's been an enduring support and a patient helpmeet and a loving partner. I think I'd like to end up on some remote island with her, celebrating our pressing towards 50 years of marriage.
Tom Kakadelis, thanks for being on the Holy Smokes podcast, my man.
Thanks for having me, Steve. Appreciate it.
Hey everyone, I wanted to announce that we have Holy Smokes gear. That's right, we have swag. We currently have hats, shirts, stickers like for your vehicle or your travel humidor, magnets, even branded bourbon glasses for a limited time. Go to holysmokes.club and click on the shop tab. That's holysmokes.club. I'm super proud of the shirts. They're made with Bella canvas shirts that are soft and incredibly comfortable. The hats fit wonderfully, which can be a problem for those of us with big noggins. We plan on having a lot more to offer, like Wyatt Vera shirts, additional t-shirt designs, beanies, polos, hoodies, cigar accessories, and much more. Check it out. And even if you don't make a purchase now, be sure to sign up for that email list, as I've thrown a couple big discount coupon codes for those exclusively on that list. So click the shop tab at holysmokes.club. Thanks.